It seems as though the effective altruism movement is the future. I mean, are the old not-for-profit charities that have been predominantly involved in aid, will their roles become less and less? Things like World Vision, things like Save the Children.
Yeah, I don't know if it'll be they become less and less or they switch what they're doing. I think we're just at the phase with cash transfers, and I'd love to see this broadly for the kind of more effective interventions where you're starting to see competition. That it's not just, is this a crazy idea? Can you just trust people to give money? But you're seeing both on the sort of donor side and on the nonprofit side, more people trying to figure out the best way to do it. And I think that would be a better world if, the World Visions and the Save the Children's and the CARES are tilting hard towards, looking at the evidence, figuring out what's effective, and selling that they can do it better than, the sort of upstart nonprofits on GiveWell's list or something like that.
Well, are you starting to see that? I mean, are they changing their policy? Are they reaching out to essentially take on some of these practices?
Yeah, it's hard to say without being in it. You're certainly seeing more of a move to cash transfers. I think that often gets mixed with a bit of old development, as in it's cash, but we'll put these conditions on it, or we'll add this extra training that may or may not work. And so, I think it's a muddy transition, but yeah, I think it's happening.
I suppose I come back to before, which I probably didn't get right to the bottom of, which was around differences between groups. And I wondered whether there would be a difference between providing universal basic income to people in a first world country like the United States or Australia who are welfare dependent and experiencing generational poverty versus providing it to a village in an African country. I wonder if there are any differences, or that we just don't really know enough about it until we actually try it.
Yeah, I think I'm in that camp. The Y Combinator study looking at basic income in the US, I think will be fascinating for those reasons. I think the drivers of poverty, there's an argument, I think a good argument, that the developed world poverty is more structural in a certain sense, that it's about what policies have you had historically, how do you set up your cities. In the US, what have you done with race relations or slavery and things like that? And so it's also structural in the developing world. There's colonialism and governments doing their own things. But I think it may be, at least sort of direct intervention, poverty alleviation, I think might be more complicated in the developed world.
Yeah. Well, I guess your ability to be effective in the developing world is dependent upon relationships at the local village level and also with local state government. But I mean, how much trouble do you have in terms of dealing with countries that their government system it's just incommensurate with running an effective aid program like that is essentially despotic? Do you just not operate in countries where that's occurred, where it's essentially a failed state?
I think the closest to that is we are working in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And I think it's certainly harder. You just have to take fewer things as assumptions, whether it's your security plans or that you can rely on rule of law to deter fraud itself or something like that. And we're just actually getting started in DRC, and so I won't declare victory yet. But mostly I think it's doable, that you can sort of do the kind of bread and butter work that we do. And I should say it's DRC, not CAR or something like that. We're not yet to operate with a big security force or something like that. And so I think there are certainly places that are currently off limits to us.
Is it in some ways easier than traditional aid in terms of in-kind donations? Because essentially all you need to provide people with, apart from the staffing and the analysis, all you have to provide people with is either a SIM card and a mobile phone that they can pay back through the actual study itself. So does it make it easier?
I think so. And we're actually experimenting with ways to make it even leaner. We're doing a project partnering with one of the big telecom companies in one of the countries where we work. And they basically have, data on all of their users. And if you look at that data, you can predict who is poor. You can sort of see how much prepaid airtime are they buying at a time. Do they call people or do they ask people to call them? Do they receive airtime? Do they send it to others? Things like that. And so you can sort of build an index of poverty. And then we're just the beginnings of trying this out, but then you can sign people up purely remotely. And so that would, be the kind of next level of how can you even further disintermediate give directly. And so I'm excited to see how those types of things play out. But it's also true that our core model itself is pretty simple.
You must require less resources to implement this.